first time I heard Geirr Tveitt was probably when I played him, because I must have been 11 years old and so on. And it was the very first of the folk tunes from Hardanger. I waited with studying this big Sonata No. 29, which I knew was a very unique piece in Norwegian music. But somehow I didn't believe strongly enough in it that it could carry through over half an hour with two themes just working on that. And I thought maybe Geirr Tveitt is a better composer for miniatures, but I was wrong. At the pandemic, I was looking at different pieces again, and I picked this sonata up and I thought, this is really something. I need to study it now. And then I started, and I took the chance and programmed it 35, 40 concerts all over the world. And I'm so happy I did, because it's really an incredible piece. And then with that sonata, and I wanted to record that, then it became a project, and I expanded it with some folk tunes and some songs, and to show the diversity of Tveitt, that he could do a big epic story like the sonata, and also really these beautiful miniatures. I'm not necessarily saying it's the greatest work written by a Norwegian composer for solo piano, but I think it's the most ambitious journey. Grieg has some wonderful pieces, and for instance his ballad for piano is probably his biggest piece. But the Tveitt sonata is longer, and it's a bigger journey, and it contains more elements, definitely, and it's more dramatic, more colorful. So the ambition of Tveitt in this piece is just enormous, and I don't know any other piece from my country which is close to that. When I started studying the sonata, then I thought there were certain pages that looked impossible. They really looked very challenging, and then, you know, with hands crossing and all kinds of things. And then after working for a while, you feel that there is a kind of natural element in it. It's really written by somebody who understood the instruments and who understood the possibilities of the instrument. And that's really a pleasure playing his piano music, because there are colors that he can do that suddenly you think, where did that come from? That's really something unique and new. And I think that was something he was all the time experimenting with himself, you know, what can I make of this instrument? What is there that has not been done? So that is also a pleasure for the ear, not only for the fingers. The modal scales is very central to his way of building a harmonic structure in the pieces. And it's very interesting to see how early he was interested in that, and not only interested, he seemed to be obsessed with it. When he was 19 years old, he wrote, I think 15 two-part inventions for the piano. And we have them because they actually got published very early. And he writes in all of these pieces on the top, this piece is only in A major or A Lydian chord, or Phrygian F sharp, or sometimes two of them combined. And it's very important for him to specify for each piece what kind of modal chords he is using. And he seems to be very proud if he's only using one modal chord or two together. It gives a color, it gives something exotic to the music immediately. In all of his compositions, he is using those scales and clashing them and making them, you know, sound interesting together. It's not structured in the same way as a piano piece by Ravel, for instance, which is so precise, everything. It is a more open world, so I find that I take more freedom actually with finding my interpretation in this piece than with many other composers. When I start with a piece like this, I read through it, or sometimes if there is a recording, I might listen to it first with the score and to see what is, or maybe also to find out what is the most challenging parts, and then simply go passage by passage. So I will you know, take this passage and then practice slow, of course, and then faster and faster. And then you get to a certain tempo after a while. Technique is a know-how, you know, to find out how to do things, and the musical instinct and knowledge comes at the same time when you work. So the second movement starts with this wonderful sound effect where I'm putting down my entire left arm on silently on all the white keys in the bass here. And what happens then is that the dampers go up inside the piano. Then you achieve a sort of pedal effect when I now play very short notes in the right hand. So there is this silence there where you're supposed to really listen to what happens to the sound. And it's quite amazing because he writes in the score a feeling of crescendo and diminuendo. It's incredible how it suddenly seems to grow in that bar. I don't know what happens, but I always have this sensation that after the last note and listening to the silence, it grows before there's a decay. And audiences get very mesmerized by this. I'm right now in the Tveitt farm in Norheimsund in the Hardanger area of Western Norway, where he lived most of his adult life. For me, it's really a strong experience to be here actually for the first time and to see where this music originated from, because there are such great contrasts in this music and it corresponds so well for me with the nature, with these cliffs and these mountains and the deep fjords and the colors and the great horizon. I have recorded this very long, wonderful sonata which has such an horizon and great storytelling. And then we are also at the ground where so much of the folk music which he loved so much was written down. On this ground there was a devastating fire in 1970. The main building here burnt down completely, and Geirr Tveitt lost actually, we think, about 80% of his works. One can imagine what that means for a creative artist. He was writing so much. There's so much music which just went up in flames. And I've actually recorded the one existing piano sonata that we have, his Sonata number 29. It's a great piece, but there has been at least 36 piano sonatas. I can only imagine what the rest could have been like. It's very strong to see these burnt manuscripts and to imagine how much music that went up in flames, and we just have these small fragments, and there cannot really be done reconstruction of pieces out of that. There has been a lot of reconstruction of Tveitt's music after the fire, but that's out of parts that were found in Oslo or at the radio or at some orchestra that had played his music, or recordings actually. There are, you know, the third piano concerto, there's a recording with Tveitt as a soloist, and they have reconstructed it, you know, just listening to the recording. Geirr Tveitt was also very much occupied with folk music and collecting folk music. And the reason why we have the first 50 of the so-called 100 folk songs from Hardanger is because they made this book that they sold to friends and to people who were interested, where he writes also explanations about the different folk tunes and the text which is missing and how it's built. And I've chosen 10 of them for this recording. Very different styles, some of them very funny. They are about how the new beer is tasting, about weddings, and then there are these more serious ones, psalm-like melodies that build up very orchestrally, wonderfully, like The Last Farewell or God's Greatness and Goodness. More orchestral sounding piece.
En sonate, den evig, og den eterisk, og den svevende.
Her det Gyri, can you tell me about the fire?
Oh yeah, the fire was in the summer 1970. And it was a rainy day, and we sat inside with the fire, my husband and I. We came from Bergen, we stayed there. My mom was here, my father was not at home. Anyway, we went to bed, and in the middle of the night, luckily, Heidi and Hauko, my brother and sister-in-law, almost then, they came home and heard it was something downstairs burning. They woke up, we were sleeping, my mom was sleeping, and the corridors upstairs were stuffed with smoke. So my husband says, just put on your shoes and run, because that's what was a good idea, but we had to run, just throw some clothes on. And we came outside, and at that time, our big farmhouse were not connected with any roads. We couldn't drive up with the car, we had to walk, and no fire department. We could call them, but it was only rain, and it was a few hundred meters down to the closest creek or river. And so when the fire department came with a long hose, it was just symbolic.
When did your father get to know about the fire?
He got to know about it a couple of days later, and I was terrified that he should know about this fire, and called the newspapers and the broadcasting and said, please don't say anything about the fire before I got hold of my dad, or we got hold of him, because it would be a total shock for him. Because the day after we went up here and tried to figure out what's happened and save some scores, which was more or less impossible. But on the other hand, there were 8 cupboards with different kind of notes and scores. And when we lifted them up and blew on them, they were just like black butterflies that flew away with the wind and vaporized. Well, anyway, my father came and was devastated, of course, when he saw this. And he said, just throw it away. Anyway, I have to say that I was so delighted that you started with the sonata right when you did, and you know that, because it was so inspiring to have this in mind, and it gave us so much the way you treated the sonata and the way you carried it around Europe. This is so special, also music of my father, this one. And imagine Welcome with Honor, the way you treated us and the way you treated the music. Yes. Yes,
Thank
yes,
you.
yes.